Okay, we decided to do a little work on the XR today. We've got the front forks and we're going to put them in the bike. If you look at this shock here, there's a 4-bolt keeper that holds the axle for the front tire. If you're looking at the front of the motorcycle, this one's going to be on the left-hand side. And before you put the shock in, it's a good idea to put this little keeper on the fork before you slide it in there, just so you don't have to try and get it on after it's in the bike. Okay, and then I'll show you where we're at here. I've got the tree kind of lined up a little bit, and just the bolt on the top very loosely placed on the top to keep it from popping off, so we'll be able to move it around when we need to as we're sliding the forks in. So basically we're going to do an install the same way we took them out. We're going to bring them in from the bottom here, work it up in through here, grab a hold of it and work it on up in here, and we're going to stop. If you look at the fork, there's a line on it, and we're going to stop when we get to that line on the top of the black part, and that means we've made it to where we need to be. Okay, YouTubers, we got the forks in. They went in very easily, as you can see, and the line that was on the fork is brought right up to this top edge right here, right to that edge, and we did them both like that and just lightly cinched these bolts down, and these bolts are a 12mm, and you can see how the front forks are orientated on there. Check that out just in case you need that. And the next step I'm going to do here is these little brackets here. What we're going to do is put them around the boots, and then you cinch them so they're right at the bottom of this tree here, so it holds those boots and keeps the dirt out of everything. Okay, as you can see, I have the bike suspended from the ceiling in the shop. It'll just make it easier for initially getting the tires on the bike and stuff like that. And this is what I've done in the past, and it works good for me. So I don't have a fancy lift like some of these other places, but it's what I have to work with. Okay, we're back, and we're working on the front brake hub. And you can see here there's just a dummy cable on this front brake hub. Everything's in there, but there's no Speedo that came with this bike, so someday I'll see if I can track down a Speedo, but for right now I just have this dummy cable in its place. It was really wet inside here with grease, and it was all over the brake shoes. So what I did is I bought a brand new seal that goes inside this inner ring here. And here's the old seal. The old seal doesn't look too bad, but it must have been leaking for sure just with how wet the brakes were. So I put some new grease inside there, and this is the part number if you're wanting to replace that seal. So there's the seal, and we're going to put some new brakes on, and this is the brand of brakes that I got, and here's the part number for those brakes, and they were EBCs. So there you go. We're going to start putting the brakes on. We'll show you how we... Okay, we got the brakes on. I don't know if everybody knows how to do this, but it's pretty straightforward with brakes. So you take the shoes and you'll be able to see which way they go when you lay them on. They come with brand new springs. And the way I go about doing it is I'll hook this bottom hook first, and I'll do that on both. And then I just take a little Phillips head screwdriver, stick it through that hook, and pull that hook into the hole, and then just press it into place. And it works pretty well. So that's the way I do it. You can do whatever works best for you, or buy an expensive brake spring tool or whatever, but that's the way I do it. So we've got our seal in there, we've got the brake shoes on, now we're ready to put it in the wheel. And once it's in the wheel, we'll take that wheel and stick it on the bike. Okay, so that's where we're at. Okay everybody, we're back, and today what we're going to do is we're going to put some new bearings in this front wheel here, and I'm going to revisit my little press that I made for working on the swing arm. And you can see I've got a socket here, and that socket fits perfectly right inside this hole here, and will keep it from moving from the other side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the wheel on top of here and get it set up so we can drive that that bearing into the wheel. Okay. Okay everybody, we've got the other bearing pressed in, and what we didn't do yet is we didn't put the seal in the other side yet, just so we can make it easier to press the new bearing in on this side. And what we've done is we've filled the cavity here with grease and also with the spacer that goes in here. Make sure you put the spacer in, because if you don't, you're going to have to pull those bearings back out and get new ones. So remember the spacer. Spacer, spacer, spacer. Just letting you know. And then if you come over here, you can see, if you get on top of that box, you'll be able to get the numbers. Okay, this is the bearings that I used for the front wheel, and they're both the same, so hopefully you can make out what it is. Okay, we're going to press that other bearing in. Okay, we've got the seal in the other side now that the bearing on the other side's been pressed in, and basically I pushed this in with my my hand until it seated pretty good, and then I took a light tapping of a hammer and tapped it in the rest of the way, kind of in a circular pattern, so it went in nice and straight, and made sure I filled the inside of this seal with grease. So the inside of that is filled with grease, the spacer's in there, and both bearings are in this wheel. So all we have left to do is make sure there's no grease at all in the brake area, and put the brake shoes in there and then stick it on the bike. Okay guys, I've done a little bit of work and I neglected to film it. Basically what I've done here is I drove the axle in from this side and just kind of tapped it in with a hammer until it went through the hub and came out the other side. You have to be careful because this area here is threaded on this Hero bike. So you tap it through until it meets this other side, and then take a 17mm socket and run it up. And the torque spec on this one, well, let's see what it is. Let's go over here. The torque spec on that one was between 36 and 58 pounds, and we torqued it down to 40. So we torqued that down to 40 foot-pounds, and then we also, in a pattern on these, kind of went, you know, top to corner bottom, top to corner bottom, until we got them somewhat pretty snug, and then we torqued them down to spec on that part after it was, that other part was torqued down, and the spec on those was between 7 and 10 foot-pounds, and we went to 8. And then we followed it up with the top up here, and these top bolts here have the same torque spec as the ones down there. So we torqued these down to 8 foot-pounds. And I forgot to mention the size. The size on these is 10mm, and these are 12mm. So these are torqued down to 8 foot-pounds. Those are torqued down to 8 foot-pounds. The main axle is torqued down to 40 foot-pounds. And then these here are also 12mm, and I kind of went in succession until I got them good and snug on both sides, and then I torqued them down to spec, and the spec on these is 15. We went to, you know, it has a variance, but we went to 15 foot-pounds on these. So these are also 15 foot-pounds. If you remember my first video, I said I was going to get a socket. I forgot to get a socket, so I'm going to have to get a socket so I can torque this bolt down to spec, because the spec on this is almost 60 foot-pounds. So I'm going to need